Story 4: The New Rich. 1. The social pulse of Untag Surabaya. The campus lobby of Untag Surabaya was more than just a hallway connecting lecture halls, it was the beating heart of the university. Bright with natural light pouring in from the high windows, the lobby was always alive with the buzz of student activity. Laughter, footsteps, the occasional shout from a friend calling another across the open space, it was a place where stories unfolded every day. On this particular day, the lobby was especially crowded. The lunch hour had arrived, and students streamed in from every direction, some making their way to the canteen, others setting up their meals on the long wooden benches spread across the space. Groups formed quickly, close friends who always ate together, classmates working on group assignments while munching on snacks, and loners who quietly enjoyed their meals with earphones in. In the center of it all, a different sort of group gathered. It was hard to miss them, not because they were loud, but because one of them stood out for other reasons. Andy, the newest face among the crowd, looked like he had walked in from a different world. Dressed in designer sneakers, a branded shirt that still had its tag barely hidden, and a smartwatch that buzzed every few minutes, Andy wasn't shy about who he was. Andy had recently transferred from a private school in Jakarta, and his arrival at Untag Surabaya had caused quite a stir. Students whispered when he passed by, not out of malice, but curiosity. Who was this kid with a new iPhone, who always seemed to carry a fresh drink from the most expensive cafe near campus? His style, his gadgets, even the way he spoke, everything about him screamed money. Joining Andy at the bench were his new friends, Rika, Susan, and Buddy. Rika and Susan had been classmates since their first semester. Both were friendly, talkative, and quick to adapt. Buddy, on the other hand, was quieter. A dependable student with modest clothes and a gentle demeanor, he didn't stand out, but everyone respected him for his kindness and thoughtfulness. The group often sat together during lunch now, thanks to Andy. It wasn't that they had bonded instantly over shared interests, more like, Andy had made himself the center of attention by sheer force of personality and, admittedly, his generous habit of treating his friends to food and drinks. Rika, try this matcha roll. I ordered 2 boxes this morning, Andy said casually, sliding a fancy dessert box across the table. Susan leaned over. Seriously? From Matcha? That place is super expensive. Andy grinned. Only the best. You guys eat instant noodles too much. You need to upgrade your taste. Everyone laughed, except Buddy, who simply smiled and continued eating his packed lunch from home, a simple rice dish his mother had made. The more time they spent with Andy, the more certain patterns emerged. Andy was always generous, but also boastful. He had a story for every item he owned: the shoes from Singapore, the phone from a limited edition drop, the bag gifted by an uncle who worked in Dubai. At first, the group enjoyed the treats and attention, but soon, the subtle jabs started to appear. You still using that old tablet, Buddy? Andy asked one afternoon, loud enough for others around to hear. I've got a spare one at home, maybe I should donate it to the museum, or to you. The laughter that followed was light, but Buddy's face barely changed. He gave a small chuckle and replied, as long as it still works, I'll keep using it. It wasn't just Buddy. Andy had a habit of underestimating people. If someone scored lower than him, he pointed it out. If someone wore worn-out shoes, he commented. It was never cruel, but always enough to make others uncomfortable. And yet, Andy wasn't evil. Just unaware. He believed his wealth made him more valuable, and he had been raised in circles where status was everything. What he hadn't realized yet was that in a place like Untag Surabaya, where students came from various backgrounds and struggles, value was measured in different terms: resilience, collaboration, empathy. And though his friends appreciated the free food and drinks, they also began noticing the gap between Andy's wealth and wisdom. Especially Buddy, who never once reacted harshly but instead responded with grace. One afternoon, Buddy stayed back in the lobby with Andy while the others left early. Andy pulled out a gaming laptop. Want to try the latest racing game? Andy asked. Buddy smiled. Thanks, but I've got to finish my assignment for microeconomics. It's due tonight. Andy looked surprised. Microeconomics? That boring class? Just copy from someone. Buddy looked up and said calmly, why copy when I can learn something useful? Andy chuckled, but something in Buddy's tone lingered in his mind. For the first time, he felt someone wasn't impressed, and it didn't come from arrogance. It came from quiet confidence. And that moment was the beginning of something Andy hadn't expected, a challenge not to his wealth, but to his worldview. Conflict begins. Andy flaunts his wealth. The atmosphere in the Untag Surabaya canteen was typically filled with laughter, casual banter, and the sound of clinking cutlery. Students sprawled across tables, chatting about assignments, weekend plans, and campus gossip. But ever since Andy became part of the scene, things began to shift subtly. He was the new rich, a student whose recent rise in social status was both impossible to ignore and difficult for some to accept. Every entrance Andy made into the canteen felt like a performance. Dressed in designer clothes and carrying the latest phone, he strutted in with the confidence of someone who knew all eyes were on him. And he made sure to keep the attention. Taman. Yang Belam Makan, I cut aku Aya. Aku Traktir, Bebas Pili. His loud invitations were met with cheers from some and awkward smiles from others. Denai and Alex, his closest companions, were quick to respond laughing, slapping him on the back, and eagerly picking their favorite items from the menu. To them, Andy's generosity was a blessing. Who would turn down free food or drinks? But beneath the laughter, there was unease. Andy's way of giving wasn't always kind. It came with commentary that made others feel small. When Buddy walked in one day, his well-worn backpack slung over one shoulder and his modest lunchbox in hand, Andy smirked and called out, "Bud, itu laptop mu masa bisa nyala. Kiliatanya kayak dislamade in Dairy Museum." The group laughed, but it was forced, especially from Buddy, who only managed a tight smile. This wasn't a one-time jab. It became routine for Andy to make such remarks mocking someone's shoes, the brand of their phone, or how outdated their clothes were. Kalau ngak punya dit, bilang Aya. Ngak usa sak gaya, he once said, laughing while nudging Alex, as if poor taste were a joke to be shared. Rika and Susan, who had initially found Andy amusing, began to see through the surface. They noticed how he rarely asked about anyone else's day unless it involved shopping or expensive hangouts. At first, they tried to be polite, brushing off his arrogance. But over time, they started avoiding the canteen when he was around, choosing quieter places to eat or study. Susan once whispered to Rika, "Dia baik si, tapi kapik jugaye, tiap hari pamer." Rika nodded in agreement. Kayak na dia pikir kita simu aku mataman karena ditna. Meanwhile, Buddy remained the steady, quiet center of the group. He never returned Andy's sarcastic comments with anger, though they hurt. Instead, he responded with patience and calm. When Andy made a snide remark about his old shoes, Buddy simply replied, "Yang pentang niaman bu 8 jalan dan masa bisa dipakai, Nd." He wasn't trying to shame Andy, he was just being honest. But Andy didn't catch the meaning behind Buddy's words, at least, not yet. The emotional distance in the group widened. Andy's desire to impress was beginning to isolate him. He thought his money made him likable, that his generosity bought loyalty. But what it actually did was build a wall between him and his friends. His jokes, meant to amuse, ended up alienating. His flashy spending, intended to show strength, came off as insecurity. Buddy observed all of this without judgment but with growing concern. He knew Andy had a good heart somewhere underneath the showmanship. He could see it in the way Andy sometimes lingered after making a joke, as if hoping someone would affirm him. But Buddy also knew that words alone wouldn't change someone like Andy. It would take time and experience for someone to understand that true value isn't worn, bought, or shouted. It's shown in how you treat others. As mid-semester approached, the group dynamic reached a tipping point. Group assignments were being announced, and the next stage of their academic life would challenge not just their knowledge, but their ability to work as a team. Andy, Rika, Susan, and Buddy were placed in the same project group, a decision that would become the turning point in Andy's journey. Unbeknownst to him, Andy was about to face a situation where money couldn't buy success, and charm wouldn't carry him through. It would be in this test of cooperation, responsibility, and humility that the real conflict and the beginnings of his transformation would unfold. 3. Turning point: the group assignment. The lecturer's announcement was met with a mix of groans and resigned acceptance across the Untag Surabaya classroom. A group project was assigned, a collaboration that would test not only their academic knowledge but also their ability to work together. For Andy, Rika, Susan, and Buddy, the news marked the beginning of an unexpected journey. As they gathered after class to discuss their roles, Andy immediately took the floor, his confident tone leaving little room for discussion. "Look, this project is straightforward. Honestly, why don't we just pay someone to do it? I can cover the cost, no stress, and we get a good grade." His suggestion wasn't really a question, it was a declaration. Rika blinked in surprise. Susan shifted uncomfortably, exchanging a glance with Buddy. While Andy's offer sounded convenient on the surface, it went against everything they believed the project was about. Buddy was the first to respond. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension. "I appreciate your offer, Andy, but we're here to learn, not just to pass. If we let someone else do the work, we won't gain anything. We owe it to ourselves to put in the effort." The group fell silent. Andy's confident smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly masked it with a shrug. "Suit yourself," he said, with a hint of irritation. With Buddy's quiet leadership emerging, the group began to take shape. He suggested a plan to divide the workload fairly: research, writing, data analysis, and presentation. Each person would be responsible for a specific part but also support others when needed. Rika and Susan, previously hesitant, found themselves energized by the clear structure. They started brainstorming ideas together, encouraged by Buddy's patient explanations and inclusive attitude. Andy, however, felt the shift in group dynamics as a direct challenge to his usual way of getting by. His wealth had often been his leverage, but here it held no power. As they settled into their tasks, Andy's frustration bubbled under the surface. He made passive-aggressive remarks disguised as jokes. "Good luck spending all that time on research, hope it's worth it," he quipped one afternoon, eyes darting toward Buddy. When Rika suggested a new approach to the presentation, Andy responded with a sarcastic, "Wow, look at you all getting so serious. Must be the pressure of doing the work yourself." But Buddy remained unflustered. He acknowledged Andy's comments with a smile but never let the negativity derail the group. Instead, he reinforced the importance of teamwork and learning, reminding everyone, "This project isn't just about the grade, it's about what we gain along the way." Rika and Susan's admiration for Buddy grew as they witnessed his steady dedication. Buddy's leadership wasn't about commanding attention, it was about listening, organizing, and encouraging each member to contribute their best. His kindness and respect created a space where ideas flourished, and doubts faded. For Andy, the experience was unsettling. His usual tactics, flashing money, buying favors, and quick shortcuts, were ineffective here. The more he tried to assert dominance, the more isolated he felt. He began to observe quietly, watching how Buddy handled challenges with patience and humility. The late-night study sessions, the thoughtful feedback, and the genuine encouragement started to leave a mark. One evening, after a long session in the library, Andy found himself staying back longer than usual. He noticed Buddy patiently explaining a complex concept to Rika, who nodded with understanding and gratitude. The scene was simple but profound, a reminder that real respect and success come through effort and collaboration. Andy started to rethink his approach. He realized that his wealth had created barriers rather than bridges. The group's project wasn't just an assignment, it was a mirror reflecting his true self and the gaps in his character. Over the following weeks, the group worked seamlessly. Andy still struggled with letting go of old habits, but he made small efforts, listening more, contributing ideas, and accepting help. Rika and Susan, encouraged by the group's progress, began to speak more freely, confident that their voices mattered. Buddy's influence was palpable. He wasn't just guiding the project, he was shaping a new kind of friendship. When the presentation day arrived, the group stood united. Their work was comprehensive, creative, and polished testimony to their shared dedication. Andy, standing alongside his teammates, felt a quiet pride that was different from the flashy displays he was used to. This pride was deeper because it was earned through hard work and mutual respect. The project became more than a grade, it became a turning point for each of them, especially Andy. It was the moment he learned that money could not buy knowledge, friendship, or true leadership. In the bustling corners of UNTAG Surabaya, amid laughter, study sessions, and shared struggles, the group found something invaluable: the power of respect, teamwork, and genuine growth. Andy's journey from isolation to inclusion had begun not with a grand gesture, but with a simple decision to work alongside others, to listen, and to grow. For realization and change. The weeks following their group project were marked by subtle but significant changes, not just in the dynamics of their group, but within Andy himself. The transformation didn't happen overnight, nor was it sudden. Rather, it was the product of Buddy's quiet, steady influence and a series of moments that slowly chipped away at Andy's old habits and perceptions. Buddy never confronted Andy directly or scolded him for his earlier arrogance. Instead, he demonstrated something far more powerful: genuine respect, patience, and an unshakable commitment to learning together. Whenever the group met to work on their assignments, Buddy treated every member as an equal, valuing their ideas and encouraging them to speak up. His leadership wasn't about dominance or control, but about fostering a space where everyone could grow. One evening, during a late-night study session in the campus library, Andy's attention was caught by a quiet scene nearby. Buddy was sitting beside a younger student, a junior who was clearly struggling with understanding some course material. The junior looked frustrated, sighing deeply and erasing notes repeatedly. Instead of rushing away or looking impatient, Buddy leaned in closer, speaking softly and patiently explaining the concept. He asked questions to help the student think critically rather than just giving answers. There was no hint of pride or self-importance in Buddy's demeanor. He wasn't showing off or expecting anything in return. He was simply there to help. Andy found himself watching for several minutes, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. It was a stark contrast to his own past, where he had often been alone in trying to succeed, pushing others away or keeping them at arm's length. Later, during one of their group breaks, Rika commented quietly to Andy, "You know, Buddy's rich in a different way. It's not about money. It's about heart, kindness, and the way he makes everyone feel valued." The words stayed with Andy long after the conversation ended. For once, he saw the true meaning of wealth not in possessions or status, but in character and actions. Andy's mind began to drift back to his past. Before the wealth and the flashy lifestyle, he had faced struggles similar to many of his peers: uncertainty about the future, self-doubt, and the pressure to prove himself. He recalled times when he had worked hard, studied late, and felt proud of small achievements. But somewhere along the way, money had become a shield, a way to hide those vulnerabilities and buy acceptance. He realized how often he had tried to buy approval rather than earn it through respect. The expensive gifts, the loud displays of wealth, the careless jokes at his friends' expense, they had been armor against loneliness and insecurity. With Buddy's example and the encouragement of his friends, Andy started to reflect honestly on his behavior. He began to see how his arrogance had pushed some people away, especially Rika and Susan, who had initially admired him but felt uncomfortable with his attitude. He wanted to change not just for others, but for himself. In their group discussions, Andy became more open to feedback. He admitted when he didn't understand something instead of pretending. He asked questions and offered ideas without trying to dominate the conversation. Buddy welcomed these changes with quiet support, never making Andy feel judged but instead showing that growth was a shared journey. One night, as the group wrapped up another study session, Andy stayed behind to talk with Buddy privately. "I've been thinking a lot," Andy began, a bit hesitant. "I guess I never really understood what it meant to be part of a team. I thought if I had money, I could buy respect or make things easier. But that's not how it works." Buddy smiled, nodding. "It's not always easy to see. But respect comes from what we do, not what we have. And teamwork means lifting each other up, not pushing others down." That conversation marked a turning point. Andy began to volunteer to help juniors struggling with their studies, just as Buddy had helped the junior in the library. He donated some of his old textbooks to the campus library, quietly and without fanfare. He even apologized privately to Rika and Susan for his earlier behavior, acknowledging how his words had hurt them. The group's atmosphere improved significantly. Rika and Susan felt comfortable again, and Denai and Alex noticed the positive change as well. The sense of camaraderie and mutual respect that Buddy had fostered was now something Andy embraced wholeheartedly. For Andy, the transformation was deeply personal. He learned that true richness was about humility, kindness, and genuine connection. The lessons he absorbed weren't just academic, they were life lessons that would shape how he approached relationships and challenges in the future. In the lively corridors and quiet study corners of Untag Surabaya, Andy's change became a beacon of hope. It showed that people could grow beyond their mistakes and that the richest individuals were often those who gave the most. And as Andy took each step forward, he carried with him the understanding that being truly rich meant more than wealth, it meant character, compassion, and the courage to change.